He's a professor, an author, a musician, one half of the Plotaholics podcast, and a playwright. There's no doubt that Shane Wilson is multi-talented. However, it wasn't until we did our third one-on-one interview that I realized I was being given the opportunity not only to be one of the first to hear, but one of the first to experience a side of Shane Wilson I had never known before.
And you still stick with me, like a ghost that is haunting. Your voice echoes through my dreams, in spite of all my leaving. Still stick with me, a little bit stronger than a memory. The way your kiss brought me to life, how I can't forget no matter how I try, how the lights flashed across your eyes on that night in the city.
I think the album title says it all, as today we turn the spotlight on Shane Wilson and his brand new album from his band Sequoia Rising. I found this fascinating in that, because I know you're a literary guy, you teach literature, you're all about very conventional wordplay, and you're very smart in how you play with words. And oftentimes, and your own work is dystopian, and it has almost an educational feel to it a little bit, but this is very introspective. This is very much you pouring emotion out. And I'm curious, is that what music really gives you? Is that something that you really feel like music really helps you find that you maybe wouldn't find otherwise?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty insightful critique there, Joe, because I think you're right. In almost all of my other work, I tend to live up here, right? And very analytical. And I think that in a lot of ways, like as I've continued to live and experience the world, I've continued to move further up into my head. A number of years ago, when we first started talking about my work, we talked about how I had started out in poetry. And I think that when I was writing that stuff, even when I was, in my mid-20s writing poetry, like that was definitely a more emotional outlet. And I've talked in other places about how getting into music helped me whenever I would hit a wall when I was writing a novel or whatever. If I could get up and play through the music a little bit, and it kind of unlocked something in me and allowed me to then, venture back into the novel. And what's really interesting is, as I think about that, I think about my third novel, which is finished, and which I wrote, obviously after I had sort of learned to play the guitar and start. And so like making music was something that I was constantly doing while I was working on that third novel. And I feel like that third novel unlocked another, like a little bit more emotion. Like it's a little bit more, it's moved down out of the head a little bit. I mean, it's still very Shane Wilson, right? But like it allowed me to I think explore a more emotional place, and I think that is something that I get from music for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's still elements of you using your literary brain
Right.
and some of the lyrics and some of the words and some of the humor too. There's
Yeah.
there's some humor injected in here, and you're very much about that when you write. And so you still have your signature. But I loved seeing the side of you and the emotional aspect of it, because you could tell like you poured a lot into this. Like it gives that vibe.
For whatever reason, I tend to keep the reader sort of at arm's length, and you see this maybe more raw version of me, or more emotionally honest version of me in flashes in those works. But here, yeah, I think you're right. Like, and maybe this is one reason why it's taken me so long to put this out, because it is so close to me, and it is so me, right? In
Yeah.
a way that I've never really shared with the world before at large. And yeah, so there's like I've sort of had to work up to that level of public vulnerability.
And the other interesting aspect of this album that I find very very fascinating is that, and I'm not saying that the first couple songs are bad,
Mm.
but this album gets better and better as you go through it. I mean,
Yeah.
the songs evolve. There's great tempo changes. There's a lot of diversity, and I'm curious about your perspective and how you arrange this, because obviously you probably recorded a few of these songs out of the order that they're in now.
Yeah.
So how did you feel about it when you were putting it together? Was that kind of intentional on your part for that reason?
Putting together a record is such a different experience from writing any kind of a story, because when you write a story, you start with chapter 1 and then you go to chapter finished, right?
Yeah.
And like there's not a lot of moving those pieces around usually, like unless you're doing something kind of experimental. But here I'm essentially putting together, I think the literary counterpart would be a collection of short stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so each one kind of stands alone, but at the same time, when they are listened to together, you want them to create this sort of aesthetic experience, right, for the reader. And so order has always been really important to me when I think about music, even when I was, in high school making like mixtapes for girls, right? Like it's really important, the order that things come in. And so I did struggle with this a great deal. And what's really kind of wild about maybe the whole thing is that it all kind of hinges on this one song that ended up being the last song on the record, but originally was the first song on the record. That city was big, but we needed more space. The city limits started choking me when it all went sideways. I don't have the authority to redraw the line, so you can have the city repopulated with your lies. And the reason why that song caused me so much trouble is because I didn't like it for a really long time. I didn't want it to go to waste. I thought lyrically it was really interesting, and lyrically it told a really interesting story, but I didn't like it musically. And so the week before I sent this record off to be mastered, I rewrote it musically. I came up with a completely different composition for it and fell in love with it again, right? Like I was like, oh, okay, now this is a song that I can be like kind of proud of, right? And it also so immediately became clear that it was the button, right? That this is the conclusion of this thing.
Yeah.
And when it slid into place at the end, everything else sort of fell into place behind it.
Mm. You know, I wrote down a couple of my favorite lyrics, which were "Turn the wall into the floor." I love that lyric. That's brilliant. And then this one, which I feel is very poignant for you, and it's very interesting that it came in one of the more I think one of the more composed songs too. There was a lot more engineering I think you probably had to do with this song, and it's and You Still Stick With Me. And I in putting your background together, because you've now done a few things. You worked with another collaborator, and you did a poetry spoken word / album, and you engineered that in some respects and produced a lot of that.
Where am I going? Where have I been? I'm spiraling out from the middle again. But I got stories I'd like to tell, tears and laughter, but I've learned them well.
Faith and I chose to move onward through the forest. A refreshing breeze rustled the leaves as the birds sang to each other through the trees. I loved the way the breeze ran its fingers through Faith's hair and wrapped her dress around her. We wandered through the forest, flowing with the energy of new possibilities.
Not sure where I'm coming from, not sure where I've been. Thought I might make a change, turn my back on my sin, reach out and claim it, live closer to the sky.
Did you feel like you had these songs banked, but they just weren't ready for you to produce, and that's kind of, you felt like you were starting to get comfortable with that role, and that's why you put this together and it kind of came together like it does?
Yeah, a lot of it was a lot of the process of putting this record together, because I've been writing these songs for like 3 years or more, maybe. The process of putting it together, it took a lot of time, because sometimes I would hear this song in my head a way that I didn't know enough yet to make it sound like I wanted it to sound, right?
Yeah.
And so I had to learn more and research more and talk to people more, and then I would unlock a skill that would allow me to make that song sound the way that I thought it should sound, and then I was able to kind of put a bow on it. So obviously, like, I started playing the guitar when I was writing my second novel. I taught myself, because I was writing about a musician and didn't want to sound like an asshole. So that's sort of the first step, right? And then the second step is that I wrote the very first song I ever wrote is the second track on this album. It's called Before We Fade Away. And that is the first song I ever wrote, and it is the most, like, I mean, I don't know that it's the most basic chord progression, but it is pretty basic chord progression. And when you listen to that song on the album, it is an incredibly layered song in terms of the engineering, and, you know, there's a couple of different guitar parts going on. There's like a bass guitar. There's like some really cool stuff. I'm really proud of that, like, electric guitar riff, right, that like plays over that. It gives it a lot of body, I think, and that song, I think, needs that. And the way that I recorded the record is I basically would put down a song, I would put down a guitar, and then I would go back and record vocals over it, and then I would just kind of like live in that for a little while and see if it needed something else or if that felt complete. And then sometimes these songs would sort of would kind of start to reveal themselves to me musically, and like as it was alive, right? And so some songs felt best when they were simple. Like, I think Every Time, the first track on the record, is one of those songs. And then some of these songs feel like they need something to help drive them a little bit more. And when I think about, like, Ask the Whiskey, right?
Yeah.
Which is, you mentioned, like, Turn the Wall into the Floor. It has this sort of cajon, this like a very typical kind of tempo, and it kind of holds on to that tempo the whole way, but that drum helps to sort of drive that track a little bit. Your voice ringing in my head, but tonight I'll ask the whiskey whiskey to let me dream of where you are back east, where the mountains turn into the sand hills. I'll dream you're waiting there for me, and tonight I'm reading your letters. But then in something like Before We Fade Away, it becomes very almost ambient, the way that electric guitar comes in there. And you mentioned Stronger Than a Memory too. That's You Still Stick With Me, right?
Yeah.
And it has, I think there's just really something kind of I don't know what word I want to use. I want to say punchy, but also like kind of magical in the way that it starts so thin, and then that bass line comes in, that boom, like there's just something like that really like brings that tune alive in that bass line, which again is super basic, but I think just really elevates the music of it. And and I think, I've written stories forever. I was in like a little short-lived band when I was in college, and it was the same kind of thing. So I do have some experience writing music or writing lyrics, but I've never had to do all of it, right? And because of the nature of this, like a lot of these songs were written but not recorded before last spring when everything locked down. And I thought I would just pour myself into this work. And so I end up like I play every instrument on the record. I wrote all the songs, and with the exception of like the song where Michelle and I sing together, I do all the vocals. So it's a wild experience to put all that together.
Yeah, I want to talk about Be the Girl, because that is that's an interesting shift and a different change. I mean, you go from Ask the Whiskey right to Be the Girl. And it's very much like they're almost connected stories in a little bit of way. Yeah, she sung on stuff you've done before. Did you? Was that you knew that there was going to be a song that you needed her for, and you wanted to bring her on for that?
Yeah, I don't know that we knew that there would be a song for her. Not at the onset, and it's one of those. I think that the album as a whole was such a weird experience putting it together at all, because how do you know when you have a record, right? Like you can write a bunch of songs, but how do you know, like, okay, that's enough, we've got it, right? And so I voiced to her and to Jerry. Jerry plays percussion with me when we play live. I've told both of them, I was like, look, I want to collaborate with you guys on, ever since the Blue Ridge Connection, I've like had this like bug for collaboration, because I think that music really allows a space for collaboration. And I think that the music ends up probably being better for it, right? Because you get more ideas and things like that. And so it was just one night we were just hanging out, and this was before quarantine, so it's not like we were forced to be together. But we were hanging out, and I was like, let's try to write a song, and let's just see what happens, right? So she has kind of a high voice, so I kind of jacked the key up on the on the guitar a little bit and played through some things, and the song just kind of like fell out of us. And I think that while I don't think this is a country record, and I don't think that I'm a country artist, I clearly have like a history with country music from growing up in the South. And I love those kinds of country duets of like there's a lot of men messed up kind of country songs, right?
Right.
But what I really love about this song and what Michelle did with it, and she really did take the lead on the writing, is that she didn't make the female character a victim.
Yeah.
She takes charge, right, in that song. And like, you're gonna regret like what you've done to me, right? And I really like that, and I think she does a great job.
I should have seen it coming. All the signs were there. You kept disappearing. There was a distance in your stare, and this house that
it about the guitar for you? Why do you feel like the guitar just came into your hands and you were able to just pick it up and do it?
I don't know. And I don't. It's something I always wanted to play.
Uh-huh.
When I was a kid, I played some piano, so I have some background in music. But I mean, as much as any other like 12-year-old, I didn't stick with piano for very long. But I remember my like piano instructor being like really pissed off that I was quitting because she thought that I had like a natural sort of inclination to the instrument. And I don't know how true that is, but I don't know. I don't know what it is. I when I first strung together those few chords, and I think any guitarist would say the same thing. When you string together those 3 or 4 chords the first time and play a song that you've heard on the radio for so long and loved, that it opens up a kind of magic for you, right? Because for so long, if you don't play music, music feels like a magic trick. You don't understand it, right? You don't like I always, whenever I would like go anywhere with anybody, Michelle can attest to this. And a song would be on the radio that I felt like an emotional reaction to. I would always stop it afterwards and be like, how did that song do that? Right. I want to understand it. And when you play a song for the first time for yourself, you feel like the magic has been given to you. And now it's your trick too, right? You're in on it. And there's something I think really cool about that.
Mm. What song are you looking forward to the most playing live?
I'd like to play Ask the Whiskey live a lot. A lot of people like people tend to respond very positively to that song.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like all of these songs are fun to play. I think lately I've been playing Haunted House more often.
For which people who haven't heard it yet is the slowest song. It's the more ballady song on the album.
Yeah, it is. And I don't know why. I don't know. There's just that's an interesting song. Is all I can really say. And musically, it's like kind of fun to play because it's got a picking part in it, and it is kind of dynamic. It has this really nice build to it, right? And then I think one reason why I've been playing that a lot is because it goes so well into the next song, so I end up playing them like back to back a lot.
Well, let me modify the question. What song would you like to sell? What song would you really appreciate getting over to a crowd?
Okay, I think there are a couple of like obvious answers for that. I think Angry James is one of those that could have like a big sort of like crowd moment.
Yeah.
Because Angry James is about a bar and is about an asshole that's at a bar, like and everything that you want to say to that person when he's being who he is. And that I think that song kind of belongs in that environment in a lot of ways because it was born out of that environment. Was filled with ink, not sure what he was hiding underneath, 'cause he tried to keep it put away. I don't know who has bruised you, James. The skin beneath your ink a little soft. Please know it didn't have to be like this. So James, Angry James, fuck off. I would love to play Amy. That song is, I think, a pretty powerful one, and my relationship with that song has really evolved since I wrote it as well. Amy it's a weird song, I think, but it's another kind of down tempo song in the second half of the record. And I wrote Amy about Amy Winehouse after I watched the documentary about her on Netflix, and I was just so like sad about her and what happened to her,
Yeah.
And so I wrote Amy, and then a few months later, a good friend of mine, another young musician, killed herself.
Oh, man.
And she had dealt with a lot of the same demons that Amy Winehouse did, right? With drug addiction issues and depression and things like that. And so because of that, it's Amy has really sort of taken on a new life, right?
Mm.
For me, because I can't play that because Amy has sort of become the song that is about the loss of young artists anywhere in any of them, right? Because some of us, some artists tend to live life a little fast, and when you lose those people like that, it leaves a real vacuum. And how do you deal with that? And what could we have done? I mean, I think the central question of that song is what could we have done differently, right? Because when you think about Amy Winehouse or Jimi Hendrix or my friend, you think about all the promise that they had and all the potential that they had to make art better than anything that I'll ever make, you know? And what did we lose as a result of that? What did we miss out on? And then we pushed you too far. It's interesting because I live in a town that is mostly a bar band town.
Yeah.
And so I do play my originals, like they will never take that away from me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's a tough sell. I think that the tide is starting to break a little bit here in Fayetteville, and it's starting to be a little bit more open to the original artists.
Mhm.
And the guy Neil Ray, who I worked on the other record with, he is in talks with some people about doing some like listening room type environments, things like that. And I am dying for a listening room here because that's where I think my music belongs, right? It doesn't belong in a sports bar while everybody's like yelling at each other over Clemson or whatever. But it belongs somewhere where people are there for music, right? Like the COVID-19 and the shutdown and everything is almost kind of been a blessing because I got out of a lot of gigs that I wasn't necessarily looking forward to. Because how many times can you play Brown Eyed Girl or Ring of Fire or whatever, before you're kind of over it.
You spent 3 years of your life on this, and I know that during quarantine, this was a real big mission for you to finish this and get this done and work on it. And I'm curious, do you feel like you're forever changed as a literary artist, as a writer, because you've spent so much time on it, because it's so introspective, because it's so different from what you've done? Do you feel like there's no going back, that you're going to incorporate a lot of what you did here into what you do in the future? Or do you feel like you can remove yourself enough and just, this is what it is when I do this, and this is what it is when I do that?
Yeah, I don't think that, as much as I might want to be amazing at compartmentalization, and I kind of am good at it in a lot of ways, though I think as I've gotten older, I've started to appreciate more the harmonies in life, and how different pursuits can interact with each other, right? That there's nothing that necessarily says that music has to be over here and writing has to be over here and
Right.
whatever, right? Or that art has to be over here and life has to be over here, right? And that's something that we talked about at the top, is that this feels like Shane, whereas some of the novels feel more removed.
Yeah.
But that third novel, which again is something that I've held on tight to for a couple of years, has been done, that I'm about to send to the publisher finally, is much more me. And I do think that that's because the music unlocked something in me, gave me permission maybe to be a more genuine version of myself.